where the sacred meets the secular, offering safe, grounded, practical, and responsible guidance for guides. This is the Psychedelic IQ podcast. So, fair warning, today's episode is a little different. At best, I would call this maybe a reverse episode. Most of the time, I get to pick guests and I get to ask them all the questions that I want to know the answers to. Today is actually the reverse of that. One of my dear friends, Wilde Lawson-King, is actually doing that to me. In preparation for the book that's coming out this spring, he was willing to come on and help me dive into my story. So for anybody who is wondering who I am and some of the wisdom that is cultivated in the upcoming book, that's all the stuff that you might get to learn in this episode. It's a pretty vulnerable episode for me. I share everything that he asks questions to. So I hope you enjoy it.
Gv, it is such an honor to be having this conversation with you. I went to bed last night and I was thinking about this today. I was thinking, we met on the day that you launched season 1, and that was our meeting. And now here we are recording an episode together on the conclusion of season 2. So yeah, thank you so much for the invitation to be here with you. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, in so many ways, the honor is mine. You're right. I launched episode 1 on the first day of psychedelic science last year, which is where we met, whether we want to say randomly or coincidentally or synergistically. We spent a couple of pretty amazing days doing breath work with Stan in the giant, probably the largest experience of breath work that at least I've ever seen. Maybe the largest experience of breath work ever on the planet, with 150 people breathing and 150 people sitting. It was some pretty powerful work, and I really appreciate how our friendship has grown from there. So I wouldn't have asked just anybody to do this, but I really appreciate your perspective and your energy and your approach to this work. So thank you.
Well, the feeling's mutual. And yeah, I'm so excited that we get to talk about, well, all of the things that we usually talk about, but this way people get to hear the conversations that we have. I wanted to sort of start by just saying how much I really value you as a person, as a friend, and as someone that I really do look up to with the work that you have been doing for many years. And yeah, I know that we sort of shared some ideas, and you've just been such a great support for me as someone that's not been in this field half as long and with half as much experience. It's been so great to find someone who I can bounce ideas off of and ask the questions that I feel like so many people have these questions, but they just don't know who to speak to or how to speak to them. So yeah, I'm just really grateful for who you are, how you're showing up in this space, and obviously even just being on this podcast is just testament to who you are as a person. So thank you.
Well, one of the things that I love the most about our conversations is you are able to come in with such an open mind and are willing to hear how my experience shows up in the work. And I would call most of it pretty grounded and practical, because that's just who I am as a computer information systems major in college, and somebody who spent the better part of 25 years in corporate and tech. We had to measure things. Things had to be seen before we believed them. That's changing a lot today. But what I love the most is that when we can have a conversation and I'll share something with you, and based on your experience doing all the work with all of the Gv studies up to this point, you are so much more well-read than I am. So all of the books that have been a part of your program and just your personal life as well. I'll mention something and then you'll say something like, well, it kind of reminds me of so-and-so author, or this concept that we talked about in class, and you should really look at this. And that's when I know that I'm onto something, when fundamentally something has happened to me in my life, or that I've written about something and you're confirming it with some other really smart person who has already written a book about it. So I know that I'm on the right path. And I love how that experience of book smart and like lived practical experience kind of merge in the middle with a lot of what we talk about. So it's going to be an interesting day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I love some of the things you mentioned in there, and it feels like a great place to jump off. You spoke a little bit about your experience, but I feel like I know parts of GV, but I mean, I'd love to know, like, who are you?
Who do I think I am? Who am I? If I talk through I would say that I have two primary traditions that I follow. One is Advaita Vedanta, more Hindu, the precursor to Hinduism, and the other is from more of a shamanic path. And that's who I'm kind of learning to be a different person, over the last 3 or 4 years with my teacher down in Peru. Who am I? I truly believe in Satchitananda, Atma. Like, I am, you are, everyone listening to this podcast is universal existence, universal truth, and bliss. Like, we are those things at our core. That's who we are. And that's self with a capital S. Who do I think I am? Or what are all of the adapted roles that I have played over my life? Son, brother. I grew up in a little tiny town in the middle of central Nebraska, 750 people. Yeah. How I got to where I am today and what I'm doing and the crazy places that I've gone and the crazy stuff that I've experienced is not something that most of my classmates in elementary school or high school would have probably resonated with. So I spent some time there in elementary school. I went to a little bit larger school of 3,500 people in central Nebraska. I actually got outed as a gay kid when I was about 13, which was a very, very uncomfortable experience in the mid 90s in Nebraska. So my junior year in high school, I actually escaped. So this is, in a lot of ways, this is where like maybe the acute trauma and the residue of my life sort of happened in this time period. And it's also where I started to develop more of a relationship with substances, to numb a lot of that, to not feel what I was feeling. But I ended up becoming a foreign exchange student in Belgium. So I lived 11 months over there, came back, finished high school, went to college, got bored with college, became a DJ on a cruise ship for 2.5 years. That was the peak of my fun years, and also like really catastrophic years in some ways. Like there was there's a lot of substances that occurred on the cruise ships, and we had a lot of fun doing it. Came back, was still a DJ. I was a DJ for 15 years.
Wow.
And did a lot of raves, and I did as many wedding dances. I think I've done 500 wedding dances, played 500 wedding dances in my DJ career. So I've heard the chicken dance and old time rock and roll way too many times. But then in 2007, I got off the cruise ships in about 2002 and started working more in the entertainment industry a little bit. I was working as a booking agent, and then also started my technology career. So I started with a computer consulting firm in 2002, 2003, and did that until 2021, until COVID really crashed our last startup. So I had spent a lot of time in product sales and marketing and technology development. And then in 2012, I decided that I wanted to feel better. Didn't know what was wrong. I just didn't feel great. So I went to a therapist, not the first time, but the first chosen time in 2012. I was about 32 years old, and I went to my first therapist and said, I don't know why I'm here, but it feels like I should be here. And she said, well, you're in the right place. And that started really a path of healing that has led me to where I'm at today. So I had been living this corporate life for a long time. And then in 2012, I started living a more like spiritual healing and growth life as well. Started off with 7 years of really intense psychodrama in a group, 3 hours every Thursday night for almost 7 years. On top of that, there was, EMDR. I spent a year with a psychoanalyst, which was maybe one of the most uncomfortable years of psychotherapy. And I found medicine work in 2015. I also got sober in 2007 and had been sober for about 7 years until 2015. And I still couldn't get to where I wanted to go. I had already finished yoga teacher training, and the shamanic practitioner I was working with said, well, the only thing I know how to do is tell you to go to Peru and sit with ayahuasca. So that's what I did. So that's really started the medicine journey. Since then, I have hosted and organized ayahuasca and wachuma experiences for people since 2016. And I did my first retreat. I took people to Nicaragua for the first time in 2021. And then since I have not long after that, I met the maestro that I studied with in Peru in 2021, December of that year, and have studied pretty much exclusively with him and his brother since then. So it's really changed my relationship to medicine. I've had a whole bunch of teachers along the way, mentors and teachers and folks that I've reached out to for different medicine work. But I'd say that kind of catches people up. Today, I would call myself a coach, a ceremonialist, an author, a speaker. Like I just show up and do the best I can. I also built and manage a conscious community on my property, and it's a very interesting place. People come to heal and grow and be in community. I think that we, as a society, are lonely. I think we are very, very lonely. I launched the Conscious Shala in 2022, right after COVID, and it's a cocoon for people to come and heal at whatever rate they need to. So that's a pretty good overview.
There was so much that I learned in there. The DJ thing, like I had no idea. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I know so much about you, but got to know so much more about you. So thanks for sharing that. There was a couple of things you said that I wanted to ask about. So you said I can't remember the year, but you said you had this feeling where you needed to see a therapist or wanted to see a therapist. Like at that point, what did you know about therapy?
Well, I had seen a therapist in high school a little bit. My parents got divorced maybe a couple times in high school. Once early on, and I don't even remember who that was. And then I saw another guy who was really an amazing therapist. We're still connected today. 30 years later, we're still connected on LinkedIn. And he was really, really profound and helped me begin to understand myself at a time when I was really confused. So there was the couple of early times. Then when I got, I was forced into sobriety, let's call it that. And I did some intensive outpatient treatment. And that also included some therapy, but it was very specific to alcohol and addiction. And then this was the first time I really wanted to go into therapy. And it was a recommendation. The individual that I worked with, she did a lot of work with people in recovery as well. And what I realized in that 7 years, specifically in the first 3, was that much of my childhood was spent shutting down my feelings, not being able to feel certain things, sort of this kind of assumption, like you as a child, you have a place, so be in your place. Like you should be seen and not heard. And I wouldn't say that that's all of my experience. A lot of my childhood was wonderful and free in so many ways. Growing up in a tiny little town, you can ride your bike to school every day and spend every summer playing baseball and going to the swimming pool. But what I really learned in those first years of therapy were how to feel again. And the first feeling that I had really lost touch with was anger. And I spent years with a wiffle ball bat and a pillow and sitting on that room surrounded by usually 5 to 7 other people, learning how to be angry again, learning that it was okay to have anger, and shaking my hands at the wrist and screaming and grabbing a wiffle ball bat and just beating the shit out of a pillow and getting all of that anger out. And what I came to realize is that underneath of, at least for my anger, underneath of my anger is fear, and underneath of that fear is sadness. And when I finally was able to start tapping into the sadness, that's when my life got better. It was all the sadness that I didn't get to feel when I got outed. Like, as a 14-year-old, we self-protect. I think Brene Brown has a wonderful quote that she says, shame only has to rise to a certain level before we begin to shut down to self-protect. So when you're meant to feel shame at any age, but especially as a little kid or even as a teenager, I say nobody makes it out of puberty alive. Everybody feels some level of shame through puberty for whatever reason. But when we shut all that down, we have to go back and feel it again. And that's what therapy helped me to do.
That's a pretty good use case for therapy. I mean, and even yeah, even not thinking about therapy as being taking a baseball bat and a pillow. I think that even opens up some. Therapy isn't just sitting and talking; it's expressing.
I think that psychodrama, unfortunately, there's not very many practitioners that I know of, at least in my location. But psychodrama was probably the most powerful method of therapy because it allowed me, it was a lot of role playing and working in the group. If I was angry at my boss one day, my therapist would say, well, pick your boss. So I would pick someone from the group to play the part of my boss. I would tell them what my boss said to me that made me angry. And then we would reverse roles and they would say that back to me. They would act like my boss and they would take me right back to this moment. Sometimes it was more than like 2 hours before I was having this like shut down angry reaction, and then walking into therapy, being able to fully express all of my emotions was the way that I realized that emotions are okay. Like we can't, the actions of anger are not necessarily okay. We can't hit people. We can't abuse and traumatize people, but the feelings of anger should be embraced as much as we possibly can. That's why any therapist or coach that I work with today, one of the first questions that I always ask them is, are you going to be okay with my anger? Can you hold my anger? Because it's still a part of my experience. As much love and light as I wish that I had on a daily basis, and as much work as I do in the medicine, I'm still a human as well.
Yeah, people still cut you up when you're driving.
Yeah, people still cut me off, and I still want to honk my horn. I honk it far less today than I did before, but yeah, and it's only because I was able to go back and heal those old core wounds about like being pushed aside and being said like you can't do this. And once you realize that it's okay to take up space, then the need to take up space becomes less.
Yeah.
So, I think that anger gets a really bad rap in a lot of spiritual circles, in a lot of psychedelic circles, frankly. There's a lot of communities that say anger is a low vibration emotion, so you really shouldn't feel that. And I tell those people to piss off. If you can't feel anger, if you are not connected in any way to your anger, then anger is what you need to feel, and you need to find somebody to help you feel it.
Yeah, and thank you for over the course of our relationship connecting me with that. That's been one of the biggest benefits of hearing your story. So you speak about the work with therapy there, and then when you were explaining about who you are, you then spoke about spirituality and about how that became a part in your life. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about your connection to spirituality, how how that formed and how that's evolved.
My parents, I don't know if they've ever mentioned God. They never went to church. I don't know if I honestly don't even know if they're agnostic or atheist. It's just never been a conversation. When I
Mm,
was a little kid, I can remember wanting to go, like walking to Sunday school to the Methodist church on Sunday mornings by myself. Again, like this is a 15 or 20-minute walk in my little town.
mm,
So I think there's always been something that has drawn me to spirituality. I can remember when I was in Belgium, I went and bought a book called Light on Yoga. I was 15 years old, BKS Iyengar's kind of tomb of yogic knowledge. I went and bought the book. I tried to teach myself yoga by reading a page in the book and like doing a pose sitting in Belgium. And it wasn't until 2012, I think, that I found a yoga teacher. And that yoga was my on ramp
mm.
to spirituality. I did my teacher training in 2013 with Saul David Ray. He was a bhakti yogi. Went out to California. I went to one workshop with him in St. Louis, and I said, "Oh, this is what yoga is supposed to feel like."
Mm.
And it was such a profound, energetic, and emotional experience for me that I just decided within a day, I just said, okay, I'm going to do this teacher training. And it was 20 days across a few different months. And I can remember something that Saul said to me on the very first day of training. He said, welcome to yoga teacher training. Like, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I've got good news and bad news. Like, your life's going to change as a result of this. And you can't ever unring this bell. And once you step onto the path, once you touch fire, you're never able to forget it. And I had such a beautiful unfolding experience in that yoga teacher training. And that really opened everything up for me. There's been so many things I can remember. Long before I got sober, I used to DJ. I used to DJ AA dances and NA dances. So Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, they would hire me to come and DJ their Halloween dance or their New Year's Eve dance. And they really liked me. So they kept asking me to come back. At this time, I was still an absolute drunk. I would go DJ their dance, and then I would like buy alcohol and like drink it on the way home. But I can remember a Halloween dance that I had been DJing. This woman was speaking, and I listened to her talk, and I went up to her afterwards and said, that was a really moving talk. Like, I really appreciated that. And she handed me a photocopied sheet of a prayer and a book, a daily reflections book from Alcoholics Anonymous. And it wasn't maybe until 5 years later that I ever made my way into the room, the 12 step. And I still have that book today. So there are all of these little things that sort of God had, infinite source, whatever you want to call it. I don't really care what people call it, but there were all of these ways that the universe had been trying to show me what I needed to see, but I just wasn't ready until I was ready. So today, I've been blessed to study with a beautiful Advaita Vedanta teacher. My first teacher, Jyoti Shalom, passed away shortly after COVID from cancer, but she introduced me to a profound the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and Advaita Vedanta. So between that and meeting the brothers in Peru, that's really my spiritual path today.
Beautiful, thank you. And that ties so well into what I was going to ask next, because again, going back to your introduction, you then said about shamanism and how you ended up in Peru. So yeah, and obviously now you're working with the maestros. So how did that come to be?
When I was at yoga teacher training, Saul's assistant is a shamanic practitioner named Andrea Bernstein. And Andrea's still practicing down in New Mexico, I believe now. And she was assisting and we did a shamanic journey. Just her and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just signed up to do a shamanic journey, and it was the first time that I ever really cracked open. There was a part of me, the divine feminine. I got to meet the divine feminine for the first time. I can remember having this really powerful, energetic experience, and this archetype who, at that time, I called Nirvana. She made herself present to my consciousness, and it was the first time that I had ever realized that there are multiple parts of me inside. And I continued to work with her for a couple of years. So that was 2013, July of 2013, I think I met her. And then I did the Moonai Key with the Four Winds Institute with her and a couple of other teachers. And I could never get to where I really needed to go. And she said, the only other way to get you deeper is with medicine. So I went and sat in Peru for the first time with another ayahuasquero in Puerto Maldonado. Funnily enough, in 2015, I was sitting at Eco Amazonia, this beautiful eco lodge up the river from Puerto Maldonado. What I didn't realize until 2021, when I met the maestro that I study with today, is that the maestro that I study with, his name is Roberto Flores Solis. His maestro was Eddie Pandoro Ramina. And Maestro Ramina actually was the primary ayahuasquero at Eco Amazonia. So it wasn't the one that I sat with, but my teachers, the maestro that I study with today, sat with a majority of their medicine in the same lodge that I sat with 6 years prior to that. So again, like the synchronicities of all of this are surprising. And I don't know if I've even made all of these connections until we're talking about it all in one shot right now. But how that happened is I had been working with primarily mushrooms and MDMA since 2019. And I hosted a retreat for business leaders, entrepreneurs, founders in 2021. So I took people down there, and another beautiful teacher that I had met, Christina Enneking, she was my assistant. We had both studied under the same Vedanta teacher. So I asked her to be my assistant. She was my yoga teacher. And when she got down there, she was like, well, thanks for asking me to be your assistant. Would you want to be my assistant in Peru this December? So my retreat, I think, was in September. And just a few months later, she wanted me to come down and assist with her. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? I haven't been to Peru for quite a while. What are we doing? And she introduced me to the brothers. And I asked a couple of questions. I really like Roberto's energy. So that year in December, we went down to Peru and we spent 2.5 weeks down there. And it was supposed to be Christina's retreat, and I was going to be assisting. Well, all of her participants canceled. So it was just her and I. We just flew down and we spent 2.5 weeks with the brothers, just the two of us. And it was exactly the way that it was supposed to be. That was in December. 6 months later, the brothers came to the US and served medicine. And after the first night, the medicine, Dr. Wachuma had come to me and said, you need to ask Roberto to be your maestro. So I went to him after that first ceremony and said, I don't know how this is supposed to work. I don't know if I'm supposed to say something specific. I don't know if I'm supposed to get down on my knees and show respect or honor in some way. But the medicine has asked me, I'm supposed to ask you to be my maestro. And he just starts laughing. And he said, welcome to the family, brother. And he said, we've been waiting for you. And I said, did you know that this was going to happen earlier today? And he's like, we knew that this was going to happen when you were in Peru in December. So that started a whole different process. And I will tell you, there is something to be said, while mine was not as intense, but there is something to be said for the shamanic sickness. So when you get initiated into a lineage, you go through a process. You have to shed and leave off all the old heavy energy that no longer serves you and no longer allows you to carry that medicine and that energy and that vibration. And that has been a very strong process for 2 years. I feel like maybe the worst of it's over. I'm crossing my fingers, but I've also gotten to a point today that whatever happens, happens. Like if it's happening, it's supposed to happen. There's a reason for it. I might not understand the reason yet, but I probably will at some point.
Mm. Yeah, you have to go through that to get to this.
Yep. Trust.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so we spoke about your work with therapy, how spirituality's showed up in your life, how shamanism has really informed who you are and how you work. Can you speak a little bit about how you work and how you came to work as someone serving medicines and supporting people in this work?
Yeah. One of my teachers, my first mentors is an ayahuasquero, said on the first season of the podcast, he said, if you think you should be serving medicine, you shouldn't. And I still think that that's true today, that there is a lot of ego that is happening in the psychedelic landscape today that's drawing people to these very powerful substances. And, it is late stage capitalism manifest through the medicine. So there's 150 plus training programs that you can participate in right now to be able to serve medicine. And I think a lot of those folks have such a human desire to heal people, or there's some just interesting aspects of like being on the cutting edge of something, which I can appreciate. How I came to do the work is I started hosting and organizing for another curandero. So he would come and serve medicine, and I started building a community starting in 2016. And it was very small in the beginning, 6 people sitting with ayahuasca in my living room. And that's grown to a much larger size of community now.
You don't still host them in your living room, just to clarify.
I don't host them in the last time we did host, we hosted ayahuasca in my living room during COVID.
Huh?
So that was the last time, but the circles have gotten larger than that. So my living room doesn't hold that many people anymore.
Okay.
But what happened is I never made a choice. I didn't make a choice to be a coach. I didn't make a choice to be a ceremonialist, guide, facilitator, curandero. Everybody has their own word. I can't figure out what I call myself. I like to call myself a spotter. I don't know where anybody's going. I think a guide tells people where they're going and says, come follow me. And a spotter stands on the ground and holds your rope and says, like, you climb up the mountain in any direction that you want to, as fast or slow as you want to. I'll hold the rope here on the ground and make sure that you don't die. And if you need help, just ask me and I can tell you where the next handhold is or where the next toe hold is. But what happened was people started asking me to hold space for them. And I was not a guide. I had no real knowledge of what I was doing other than to say I was assisting for these larger group ceremonies, and I just started to be a trip sitter. And it was really just holding safe space and playing music. So I had stopped playing music when I got sober in 2007. I started playing music again when people started asking me to trip sit in 2017. So 10 years later, I started playing music again, just very different kind of music. And people weren't dancing. So that's really the way that it started. 2017, I started trip sitting. 2018, I was in Hawaii with Ram Dass. And that was where my given name is Shane. That's what my parents still call me today. In 2018, I was studying with Ram Dass, my root teacher, from a spiritual perspective, and he offered me the name Govindas. And the GV is short for Govindas. And I met my first LSD teacher there.
Wow.
We were roommates. He is a crazy, wonderful, amazing, incredibly intelligent and wild New York Jew who lives in the Mission in San Francisco. And he taught me a lot about how to use primarily LSD at that time and hold space. So I started leaning on him more as a mentor. From there, I switched to mushrooms in 2019. I switched to a different mentor who is sort of my psychedelic supervisor today. And then in 2020, I was having some really difficult times. I was trying to go deeper into my personal work. And at that time, we were doing a high dose LSD, so 600 micrograms. And with 600 mics, I could still be standing up, having a conversation. I could definitely feel the effects of the medicine, but I was never going to places that people normally taking 600 mics of LSD would go to. And fortunately, I was in San Francisco with my teacher, and we were at a workshop at the California Institute for Integral Studies, and Chris Beisch had just released his book, LSD in the Mind of the Universe. And Chris was doing this workshop, and I went up to him in a break and I said, I'm trying to use LSD. I'm taking 600 mics and I'm not going to where I need to go. And his recommendation to me was use 100 mics and MDMA instead of high dose LSD, incorporate MDMA into your experience and go much lower dosage. And if that's one thing in the book that I talk about a lot is start much lower than you think you need. I have known people to do so much beautiful work on 1.5 grams of mushrooms. 5 grams is really unnecessary for 80% of the people. Even though Terence McKenna thinks that we need to do a hero's dose, most people don't. So that was Chris really helped me along my journey and has helped me multiple times since then, has answered some really important questions for me and has been a beautiful resource, and thank him a great deal for his book and his work.
Absolutely.
So that really changed the way of my relationship to medicine in 2020. And then really it's been mushrooms and MDMA since. My teachers serve ayahuasca and wachuma. I've never been given permission to serve those medicines. I sing the Ikaros, but the doctors have not come to me and said, it's time for you to serve now. So I've been given permission to serve mushrooms from the doctors. That's my practice today. We started the Church of Universal Consciousness in 2022. And that is the container that we use for our spiritual practice and do both one-on-one group work in the church, and then also often take people to retreats. So we go to Peru for various lengths of time, but I go to Peru for a month every November. Usually take people down there. We spend a couple of weeks in the mountains doing wachuma. We take a little jaunt to Machu Picchu, and then we spend a week in the jungle sitting with ayahuasca. So there's a few different ways that we're working with medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thank you so much for explaining your journey into coming to work with these medicines. Again, I know you as the person that's working with them, so it's really fascinating to get to learn how you get there. And you've interviewed my teacher on this podcast before, but he says you only get the next step, you don't get to the whole journey. So it's it's lovely to hear how your steps have formed this path.
If you're a facilitator out there listening to this, and it's all your individual energy that is going to being able to serve mushrooms or going to be able to serve psychedelics, just go slow. Sit with medicine more, hold space for other people, learn from other people, because what will eventually happen is people will experience your energy, your love, and they will say, will you help me? And that's when you know you're on the right path. If it's all your energy, there's a really good chance that there's some ego involved. And I'm not saying that I am not without ego. So don't misinterpret. I don't want anybody. I'm still very much a fallible human being with an ego and working on my own shit. But if you're the only person that's really trying to make this happen, then I would encourage you to save a little more room for spirit.
And community.
Yeah, your community will be the best judge of what you should or shouldn't be doing. When people start asking you to do the work for them, trust. Go slow. Get some training. Find a mentor. And stay out of people's business. Don't hurt people. and as we've often said, don't fuck your clients.
I mean, that should be a given, but still needs to be reiterated. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
it needs to be reiterated.
Yeah. All right, so I feel like we've covered a lot of who GV is and how GV has come to be. So GV's written a book, Healing with Psychedelics.
Woof! I think that the doctors and God wrote the book, and GV has just been the one waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning for the past 9 months, trying to get the words on the page. But yeah, I have been a party to a book writing.
So that obviously may not have come. Well, it came from you, but maybe through you. But I mean, how did this book come to be? Like, what was the journey to get here?
I'll try and make it quick, but there's sort of an operational way of how the book came, and there's a spiritual way the book came. And I think the latter is probably more interesting, but I started writing. There was some harm that I was noticing in our local community, and I started writing a blog post about it probably in 2021. And that blog post turned into about 25,000 words, and it turned into this little book that I just self-published called the Psychedelic Field Manual. It's available on my website for anybody who wants to download for free. And it was a great little project, and it reminded me how much I enjoyed writing, and it resonated with people because it was super practical and it was really grounded, and it just helped people understand what they were going to be exposed to when they came out on the psychedelic landscape. So that was the first thing. And then sometime, maybe a year or two ago, I wrote a blog post called The 7 Steps to Psychedelic Success. And that is really what morphed into what was originally called the 12 Steps to Psychedelic Success and now is called the Psychedelic Safety Wheel. But it was these 12 buckets of things these 12 variables that we should be focused on optimizing. I realized that we've been talking about set and setting since Tim Leary in like 1964, but nobody has ever went to the length of saying it's more complicated than that. We all know that it's more complicated, but nobody has quantified it in quite the way that I'm trying to do. So book, blog post, and then what happened was I just used all of my corporate experience of designing websites, and I wrote down, I don't know how many note cards. I probably had 250 note cards of topics that people that wanted to use psychedelics, there's these 250 ideas that they needed to know about. So I wrote a whole bunch of note cards down, and then I started organizing them into piles. And at the end of it, I just named the piles. It's a system we call card sorting in website development. I basically just built a giant website with the information that was in my head, and then I started researching and writing. Now that's the operational side. I will tell you that I'd had this idea to write the book for a while, last year, I was down in Peru with the teachers. We were at Vilcabamba up in the high jungle of Peru, sitting with Dr. Wachuma. And I asked Dr. Wachuma if I could have permission to write the book. And the medicine said, yes, but you have to write it in service to God and love. And I said, okay, I'm willing to honor that commitment. So I did the table of contents. I wrote the table of contents last year in Peru, came back. I started writing in January. And from January until March, everything was going pretty well. I had written about 50,000 words. And then I had a really challenging experience with mushrooms and MDMA. And it was a hard journey to talk about because there was some harm that happened in the journey, and there was also a lot of healing that happened in the journey. And I've often heard harm can happen in a healing journey, healing can happen in a harmful journey. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what happened. But it really threw me off the horse. So I stopped everything. I really had to spend about a month and a half, almost 2 months, integrating that experience. My teachers came in May, and I sat with ayahuasca and Wachuma both. And during my last night of ayahuasca, I probably had the first really, truly transformational experience. The medicine, this is the when we talk about dosage and how dosage is not always just about the amount of anything that you take. The night before, this is the third night of ayahuasca, the night before, I had taken 2 cups of ayahuasca and it was like just fine. Like I was having a beautiful journey. It was just the right amount. The third night, I took the first cup, felt nothing. Took the second cup, felt nothing. Took the third cup. Then Dr. Ayahuasca said, okay, now it's time to do some work. And I laid down, and out of nowhere, I heard a voice say, "You are love." And that was not a voice that is not a phrase that I would have ever said to myself. So I listened to it and I heard it again and I said, okay, like I'll buy that. And when I was willing to believe, when I trusted the medicine, it started about a 2.5 to 3 hour process. One of the most powerful, intense experiences of my medicine world. And it felt like a complete cellular surgery and upgrade. And it felt like I had been plugged into a 220 outlet and still running on 110 wiring. So it was a lot of energy. The entire time I was incredibly conscious. I could see people walking by me, or Roberto would come and say to me like, brother, how you doing? And he knew, he can see what's happening in my process with permission. He knew what was happening and would just chuckle and walk away. And it was a profound energetic upgrade, but I will also say this, and it was a very confusing time because it felt like I had been given this moment of self-realization, but I was not given the tools to put that into practice. So we think about like, I am love, which would imply to me that I should just go out and love everybody. But I couldn't do that. There was something missing. And that was in May, still not writing the book. Then finally in August, I sat with the brothers again. Once again, the night one, I drink 3 cups of Wachuma and am able to sleep that night, which is rare for Wachuma, but I drank 3 cups, very, very gentle journey. Second night, we do a little ayahuasca, no problem. Third night, I say, well, I'm flying tomorrow. I want to get some sleep, so I'm just going to do a small dose of Wachuma. So I drank 1 cup of Wachuma. 4 hours later, Dr. Wachuma comes. I see out of the corner of my eye this energetic field, and Roberto had already told me before the journey. He was speaking all in Spanish. I probably only understood half of it. I wish that I would have understood all of it now. But he said, the doctors came to me and said that they may perform emergency surgery on you tonight. And I didn't really know why and what that meant, but that's what happened. And for about an hour and a half, again, fully conscious, eyes open, the medicine came in and quite literally, I would say, replaced my spiritual heart. It felt like my fourth chakra had been replaced to the point where for the next week, I could feel the center of my chest, and nobody had touched me the entire journey, but the center of my chest was sore to the touch where they had come in and performed emergency surgery. That was the beginning of August, and I came home from that work, and then the medicine said, okay, now you can actually write the book in service to God and love. This is the tool that you were missing, and now it's time to write. And in 6 weeks, I wrote about 60,000 words. And it was the most intense process that I have experienced. And I will say that I have more tools now than I ever did before. To the point where from August until almost October, I think that I had only experienced anger one time. And it was so short. It was just like one day that I had some angry feelings. And with the help of Dr. Tobacco and some prayer, the next morning I got up, released all that anger, and then it was just gone. So I felt like I got May was this self-realization moment, and August was now you have the tools. So now you have to go out and use them. So that's how the book came to be. It's two very different paths, but I think they have intersected in a really interesting way.
Wow. Thank you for explaining that. And yeah, I mean, I've got to ask, but was there, even in the writing experience, you say the quantity of writing, but have you noticed a difference in how you write kind of before and after those periods?
Yeah, the first 3.5 months was a struggle. It was like writing a term paper that you didn't know anything about. And I knew a lot about what I was trying to write, but putting it together, it just didn't flow. It was not ready. And when I came back in August, it was just the words wanted to come out, and there was nothing that was going to stop them. And I will say this, that I had a Vedic astrology reading done in January, and the astrologer said, you need to finish the book in September, because at that point, something's going to shift in your chart, and it's going to be harder for you to organize things in your mind. It's going to be harder for you to think critically. And I got to tell you that it was the third or fourth week in September, the energy shut down. I was like operating on universe energy for about 6 weeks, and then it cut off. And I continued to try and write with that same level of fervor and energy. And I ended up I get a little fever blister when I know that I'm running off of my energy instead of universe. And it was basically saying, okay, now you're done. Now it's time to slow this whole process down. And that's what it's been since then. Fortunately, it's gone to the editor now. So there's some more writing that has to happen, but the hard work had already been completed.
Wow. Okay, so we spoke about you've written this book, but what is the book about?
I'll say the bulk of the book is really practical.
Right.
What started out as the 7 steps to psychedelic success then became the 12 steps to psychedelic success, which now has become the Psychedelic Safety Wheel. So this idea of, if you think of a wheel with 12 spokes, the idea is to fill up that wheel as much as you can. Like the more even and full your wheel is, the smoother the ride, the smoother the experience. So that wheel is made up of benefits. So what are the benefits of psychedelics? What are the known benefits of psychedelics? What are the risks in relationship to your individual process? How should you prepare? So preparation, substance, I cover, I think, seven different substances in the book. Facilitation, how to find a facilitator, how to know green flags and red flags, what to look out for. Intention, once you're working with a facilitator, they should be able to help you come up with that intention. But there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can do to make intention setting a lot easier. Dosage, setting, which we know about, set and setting. That's really I've expanded set and setting to 12 variables instead of 2. So setting, what's included in that. Mindset, how to best prepare your mind before going into the experience. And then the experience itself is a spoke. How to prepare for the experience, what to do the day of, what to do afterwards, how to deal with challenging experiences. So if the medicine is really strong and you're experiencing a challenging experience, like what are the ways that you can work through that? And then finally, the last two are integration, how to understand your journey, and activation, which is not something that many people talk about. And once you understand the journey, there's so much work that has to be done to incorporate that into your life. And that's what I call activation. So integration is understanding. Activation is action. And if you're not doing your activation, you're basically you're getting high. So you can do a lot of medicine. You can understand everything. But if your life isn't changing, then there's a piece that's missing.
Yeah, and I just want to pull up on that. So you've spoken about integration and activation. So what's the difference there? I mean, integration, I feel like, is spoken about, but what's activation?
So yeah, integration is the understanding. What happened in my journey and how does it relate to my life? You understand how the content from the experience relates to the content of your actual life. That's just the understanding piece. Activation is actually taking that understanding and putting it into practice. So 80% of the time, the medicine is not going to do all the work for me. Sometimes you might get a new heart. Those are one of those silver bullet journeys. It's the 20% where the medicine comes in and does some work for you, and then your life is just different. And you don't have to do anything. I haven't tried to not get angry. I've just not experienced anger. I didn't have to do anything different. That's the 20%. Those are the silver bullet magic pill journeys. 80% of the journeys require you as a human being to go out and change your life, like to eat healthy or to make amends with your parents or to love your partner or to divorce your partner or to get a new job, or like there's a lot of action. I think that psychedelics most of the time it's like drinking awareness through a fire hose. We get so much awareness in the medicine, but if we don't take that awareness and put it into practice, then we're just doing drugs. So putting it into practice is activation.
Got it. And how did activation come to be with you? What did integration not have that activation, or that you felt was missing?
In hosting ceremonies now for 8 years, I continued to see people showing up year after year, sitting with ayahuasca, ceremony after ceremony, coming back in. Their life never changed. They would have these profound experiences that they would share about, how much information that they got, but their life wasn't any different. They were still struggling year after year with the same stuff. And I said, something's missing. We're doing integration. We're sitting around in a circle and we're talking about our experiences and we're understanding what we need to do. But nobody's actually, not nobody, there was many people who are not actually doing the work. And I think that activation is the work. It's the human work. We have a psychological process. We have a physical process. We have a spiritual process. So much can happen spiritually in the medicine. So much psychological content can happen in the medicine. But we have a physical process. We have a human body. The Buddha said this human body is such a gift because it allows us to clear out all of our karma. Like, you have to be in a human body to deal with your karma. Pets don't have karma. They don't have intention. They're just operating on basic instincts. As human beings, we have a responsibility to deal with our karma. And dealing with that in the human process is activation.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to delineate the two and highlight something that exactly that you can get into the integration, but not do anything with that. It's like I know this, and I'll carry on with my life, or I don't want to do anything about this. So yeah, I really love that. Um, and so the psychedelic safety wheel. So this is who do you see this being for? Is this for guides, facilitators, or like who's this for?
The book isn't necessarily for facilitators. I think that facilitators could learn a lot by thinking about, and they could really help their clients by looking at these 12 spokes in the wheel and saying, how am I addressing benefits with my clients? Am I addressing risks with my clients? Does my clients' expectations meet the known benefits of psychedelics? Am I talking about risks with my clients? How am I preparing? How am I integrating? Am I keeping my clients accountable to their activation plan? So I do think that facilitators can use it, but I do not prescribe. I always say there's no one way to psychedelic.
Mm.
I am not here to tell anybody how to use their medicine or how to serve their medicine. But this is a really good 12-point framework if you want to button up and make your serving, at least in the global north, if you want to start acting like a professional, and I know that's a really loaded word, and there's some challenge around the idea of colonialism with the idea of professionalism, but people in the West, in the global north, expect professionalism. It's probably not an indigenous word, but if you want to be a better, more professional facilitator, figure out how you're incorporating these 12 points into your work. Who the book is really written for are three types of people. Person A has never used psychedelics and wants to. They want to heal or grow in some way using this medicine. Person B has maybe had experience with psychedelics recreationally, but now is ready to do a more intentional healing path. And then the third type of person is somebody who maybe had a really negative or challenging or harmful experience with a ceremony, a retreat center, a facilitator. They're not opposed to using psychedelics again, but they want to do it better. They want to be safer. Or they want to have more sustainable, longer lasting results. Those are the three people who should read this book.
So, I mean, I'm not too sure. This feels like a more of a harm reduction kind of tool. So it's like it's there. Well, you call it the safety wheel, and there's a lot implied in there. But that's ultimately what this is. It's to support the people that are either going through the experience or supporting people in the experience.
Yeah, and I would say if we take a step back, if we think about like a spiritual container, a container in this kind of context is this metaphorical container that holds energy or knowledge or responsibility.
Mm.
If we look at psychedelics in the first container, people have been using psychedelics for thousands of years, but they've primarily been held and served by indigenous practitioners, shamanic practitioners. And it's the practitioner who holds all the responsibility. They're serving you the medicine, they're holding the space. They have been given permission, usually within a lineage, to be able to do that. That container is still in place for many people. Then there was another container that was created. Do you remember when Albert Hofmann discovered LSD? 1938, maybe? Somewhere around there?
Yeah, that's right.
So that was the second container that got built. So LSD comes onto the market. Sandoz Chemicals decides to give it to therapists and scientists all over the world. And this new container was being created, but it was being held by scientists and therapists and underground practitioners. Many of those underground practitioners were still operating in some kind of lineage. They were being taught by someone. Like this is like if we think about Maria Sabina as being the origin of the bridge that brought this medicine into the West, I think there was a desire to use it in a very spiritual fashion. So that was the second container. And then that container got exploded in many ways with the Controlled Substances Act. There's been a group of underground guides that have been doing their work since then, and that container is still fundamentally intact. But now we have this bigger container. It's the corporate container. It's the late stage capitalism container of psychedelic schools, psychedelic training programs, and guides going and getting trained for 3 months in an online program up to 1 or 2 years, maybe with practical experience, maybe not. But we are flooding the market with guides. Nobody really knows whether one guide is good or one guide is bad. One guide is ethical, one guide is unethical. You can't say, like, as a guide, I could say, well, I went through this certification program with training company XYZ, and you could post your certification on your website if you wanted to. But a client has no idea. That certification is not worth the paper that it's printed on. And clients can't be expected to understand there's no rubric for looking at training programs. There's no Google reviews for psychedelic guides. So it's really hard. Everything in the underground right now is really hard to keep track of. So all of this to say, the safety wheel is a bottom-up harm reduction model, a framework. Mm-hmm. By bottom-up, I mean, let's give all of the information to the seeker instead of relying on the guide, instead of relying on the shaman from the first container, instead of relying on the clinician, the scientist, the therapist in the second container. Now, instead of relying on all of these guides to be ethical, safe, responsible, educated, instead of relying on them, let's put information in the hands of seekers, teach seekers how to become informed consumers. I know people that are spending way more time researching their last flat screen TV purchase or spending more time on Consumer Reports deciding what washer and dryer to buy than they are researching their facilitator, because there is no way today. There is no succinct way to research your facilitator or research your whole entire experience. And that's what I'm trying to do with the framework.
That really explains it. Yeah, thank you. And let's highlight facilitation. And so what does the safety wheel offer for advice guidance on facilitation?
There's a lot. It's probably one of the biggest chapters. I think the facilitation chapter is close to 12,000 words. And there's a lot of folks in the psychedelic community today that say, you don't need a facilitator. Go ahead and just take psychedelics on your own. And that's fine if you have experience taking psychedelics already. I think that there's a lot of facilitators out in the world today that are encouraging people to just do their own medicine by themselves or with their community members. And I think it's easy to forget what it's like to be a newcomer again. Because newcomers don't understand the map of their mind. They don't understand how the medicine is going to treat them. They don't understand what to do in the event that something bad happens. So for a newcomer, I do recommend facilitation, especially if you have PTSD, trauma, you're working on really old and sensitive content. Because if that comes up in the middle of a solo journey, it could be really challenging. I have helped countless people have to integrate solo journeys that just took them too fast, too far. So there's red flags, there's green flags in the book, intending to help people look at qualities to look at in their guides. And if you see certain things show up while you're preparing with your guide, I encourage people to just ask more questions, go slow. If you hit a deal breaker, walk away, even if you paid a deposit. I tell people all the time, if you've already paid your deposit for your experience and some big red flag comes up, walk away. Forego your deposit, because the cost to go through months, if not years of therapy to repair the damage of a harmful facilitator is far worse than the deposit you've already paid.
Mm. Yeah, no kidding. And yeah, the corrective experience is far harder to facilitate than the original experience. So getting the original experience right is key.
Yeah.
And just on that, just I'm wondering if you have, like, for you as a, maybe you don't want to be known as a facilitator, but when you are working with clients, I mean, what kind of questions are you hoping that your clients ask you, and how, and has that informed the book?
What's your training? Why are you qualified to do this for me? Do you have experience with people like me, whether that's PTSD or neurodivergence or whatever people are coming in with? Anything from what medicines you serve, how much experience do you have with those medicines, are these medicines going to interact with my psychotropic medicine, the pharmaceuticals that I'm taking? The questions are innumerable, and there's a list of questions, both in the book and on psychedeliciq.com. There's a resource for questions to ask your facilitator. After this book gets published, we're going to be working on a second book that is a workbook that will really take you step by step through the process. And then also we have a training course launching in January. I'm teaching a live taught training course. People sign up, and then once a week we cover one of the spokes in the psychedelic success. The psychedelic safety wheel.
Amazing. So speaking or focusing on the book for a minute, and I'd love to maybe unpack the further training that will come as a result of the book. But so the psychedelic safety wheel, is this is what the book's about? Is there? What's the question I'm looking for here? What do you? Can we cut it? Or but
That's fine.
thank you. It was on the tip of my tongue and then went. Okay. So we've covered the psychedelic safety wheel. Is there anything else that is spoken about in the book that you would like to highlight here?
I wrote a chapter that was supposed to be an appendix. And I just said, this is my perspective. It's the theory on how and why psychedelics heal. Right now, there's a really fun story. There's a Sufi mystic by the name of Nasruddin. And he's a cheeky mystic. He says a lot of really wise stuff that also sounds really dumb. And as a person listening to these stories, you always have to scratch your head and nod it at the same time. But the Nasruddin story is Nasruddin's sitting under a lamppost on his hands and knees. It's pitch black outside, and he's under this lamppost. And a friend of Nasruddin's walks by him and says, "Nasruddin, what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm looking for my keys." And the guy said, "Oh, well, I'll help you." So the guy gets down on his hands and knees, and they're looking under this lamppost, and they look for an hour, and they can't find Nasruddin's keys. So the friend turns to the Sufi mystic and says, Nasruddin, are you sure that you lost your keys here? And Nasruddin says, no, I left them at home. And the guy says, well, why are we looking here? And Nasruddin says, because this is where the light's at. I think that this is where we're at with psychedelics in the global north, in our Western scientific materialistic culture. Scientists put people in fMRI machines and they say, when we expose them to trauma, their amygdala lights up. And when we expose people to psychedelics, the default mode network, these multiple parts of the brain change and it shuts down the default mode network. So psychedelics equal a decreasing of the default mode network. Scientists are looking underneath the lamppost of the brain. Therapists say trauma is stored in the mind. Trauma is maybe stored in the body. If we look at Bessel van der Kolk, the body keeps the score. Trauma is stored in the muscle tissue, in the nervous system. So therapists are using psychedelics as a way to get to trauma. And they're looking under the lamppost of the mind and trauma. Spirituality is another lamppost, and we can look at, like, in yoga, they're called samskaras. They're imprints, said imprints in the mind, imprints on the heart. When you go to a Vipassana course, you learn about sankharas, and it's heavy energy that's stored in the body, and you spend 7 days in a Vipassana course in meditation, 12 hours a day, scanning your body, trying to release this old heavy energy. So there is a scientific lamppost, a therapeutic lamppost, and a spiritual lamppost. And they're all fingers pointing at the moon. They're all saying, here, look at my finger. This is what psychedelics are doing. And I think that they're all true. All of these, all the research that we're finding right now and the ways that people are using psychedelics is all valid. What I have learned in my teachings is that at a very basic level, psychedelics are very simply just cleansing low energy vibration from our body, our mind, and our spirit. If we connect all of this back to science, string theory, quantum physics say that we're not matter. We're all just waves of energy. And depending on the frequency that we vibrate, it looks different. So we're tightly wound. Our bodies, our minds are just tightly bound waves of energy. And all of those waves of energy are vibrating at a certain frequency. Every thought that I have vibrates at a certain frequency. Maybe it's a thought that is shame, or fear, or love. Shame and fear, if we look with David Hawkins created the map of consciousness. That's sort of the model that I use in the book. I overlay the map of consciousness on top of all of this. But a fear thought or a shame thought vibrates at a frequency of 20 in his scale. A love thought vibrates at 500. When we ingest a psychedelic, they are vibrating at such a high frequency that they come into our body. They are like heat-seeking missiles for low vibration energy, and they help us liberate, transform, transmute that energy. So there is what started off as the appendix to this book of how and why psychedelics heal. I connect quantum physics to Hinduism and Advaita Vedanta in the Atman and the Brahman, all the way to limbic resonance and psychotherapeutic practices, nervous system work, and then connecting it all to really just psychedelics are helping cleanse our systems. They are helping us release low vibration energy. So what started off as the ending of the book now is the beginning of the book and required a pretty significant rewrite. But if you're interested in a very novel theory, that is how I believe that psychedelics are healing. And frankly, it's the way I've been taught in South America. My teacher intuitively knows this. What I did was just try and offer some scientific and spiritual wisdom to connect all the dots.
Mm. Thank you. And I mean, I have to ask because I'm so intrigued, especially coming from the training that I'm in with, learning from Stan Grof's model. And Stan Grof talks about the inner healing intelligence. Yeah. Have you been able to reconcile that with this how and why psychedelics heal?
We touched on it at the very beginning. You asked, who was I? And I said, I am Satchitananda Atma. The Hindus, the rishis, 3,500 years ago, talked about the Brahman. And it's the energy, it is the substratum of everything. The Brahman has three characteristics: universal existence, universal truth, and bliss. That's the only three characteristics that make up everything in the world that we experience, including ourselves. The Brahman, we get a little piece of that Brahman that lives inside of us. It's called the Atman. That piece of us that lies deep within, the piece of us that the medicine came to me and said, you are love. It was trying to show me that I am universal truth, existence, and bliss. It is this healing path is a remembering. It's letting go of whatever is not Sat Chitananda Atma, whatever is not universal existence, truth, and bliss. When I let all of that go, all I'm left with is love. And what I'm left with, the Atman, I believe is inner healing intelligence. There is a part of us, it doesn't yearn to be healed. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's maybe one way to look at inner healing intelligence is this part of ourselves that wants to be healed, or that is returning to wholeness, I guess. That part of us has never changed. That part of us has always been perfectly healed. This is the paradox of spiritual work. We are both 100% divine and 100% human. We are both 100% healed and 100% broken at the same time. All we have to do is let go of the broken parts. The more of the broken parts we let go of, the closer we become to a perfectly healed part. And that part has always been healed. We just have to remember it. We have to remember who it is. And we can't, in the words of the rishis, the veil or Maya, cosmic illusion, is what separates us. There is a veil between our human level of consciousness, the adapted self, and our authentic self, which is Satchitananda Atma.
Thank you. That's quite quite different way than I've ever heard, especially when it comes to Stan's work, but the inner healing intelligence, how that's described, and to hear that kind of correlated with Atman is, it really bridges the science and the secular, the science and the spiritual.
That's my hope. That is
Yeah.
that is truly the hope of the book, is to draw a through line between the sacred and the secular, and to give people whatever information they need. Some people need scientific information, and there's a whole bunch of scientific research that's quoted in the book. And there's a whole bunch of spiritual and practical and therapeutic knowledge that's in the book as well. So take what you want and leave the rest.
And how has, I'm assuming you've shared this meta theory with a few people now. How is it generally being received?
Thus far, there's a scratching on one's chin and saying, it makes sense. The problem is that none of it can be proven. And it's only a theory. We can't prove that the Brahman and the Atman exist, because it's like asking science to define consciousness. Or it's like asking AI to become conscious. That's like asking a child to give birth to their parents. consciousness created science. Consciousness created humans, which created AI. There's no way that a subsystem can subsume its parent system. You cannot ever understand consciousness. You can only be consciousness. So we can never redirect our consciousness back on itself. This is what Alan Watts would say, can your finger touch itself? Can your eye see itself? No, no more than consciousness can ever watch itself. So what I'm proposing is theoretical, but I will also tell you that when you get to a point in your medicine work and you start having experiences that confirm or that give you the felt sense that all of this is true, it's a hell of a lot easier to go in with some understanding into a giant 5-MeO experience and have a big, powerful experience of God consciousness and then come back and say, oh, now I get it. I felt what the Brahman and the Atman really were. And I am that. Tat Twamasi is a fundamental precept of Advaita Vedanta. Tat Twamasi is I am that. I am consciousness. I am universal truth, existence, and bliss.
And how is this? How is this supporting you? I guess in your own work and supporting clients. How does this? Like you say, this is just a theory, but how do you find that this theory has supported you so far?
I had been sitting with ayahuasca for almost a decade, and I was terrified every time I would go into medicine work because I didn't know what holy hell was going to be unveiled in one of my journeys. And last November, I was sitting with my teacher in Peru, and I was telling him that I was afraid. And he asked me, turned to me and said, brother, why are you afraid to go do this work? And I said, because I don't know what's going to happen. And he said, it doesn't matter what happens. Wouldn't you want it, if something needs to be cleansed inside of you, wouldn't you want it out of you rather than in you? And when it was so simple and clear like that psychedelics are only cleansing, and they're only cleansing the heavy energy, shame, guilt, fear, apathy, all of those low vibration, sub 200 levels of consciousness on the map of consciousness scale, why wouldn't I want to come in and do the work? And when I finally understood that it was really that simple, that it had nothing to do with the brain, it had nothing to do with the mind, it was just low vibration energy that was ready to leave my body, and to trust the medicine that it's never going to give me any more than I can handle. When I realized that, so much fear disappeared from my system. And I've been able to sit with really powerful medicines, even with lower doses, having very powerful experiences without any of the fear that used to exist. So if nothing else, I think that the only thing that humans hate more than change is uncertainty.
Mm.
And if this theory can even begin to offer a little bit or a sense of certainty and a sense of trust with these substances that says all they're doing is just showing me what I need to cleanse, showing me what I need to release. And all I have to do is just be willing to let it go. There's a funny quote that was written on the bathroom stall of a treatment center that said, everything I've ever let go of had claw marks on it. And for so long, I was holding on to all of my old shit with claws. And what the theory has allowed me to do is just retract the claws and let it go.
Well, it would definitely make the approval process with the FDA a lot simpler if they understood that these are just cleansing agents, not. Maybe you can speak to Rick about that.
If the unfortunate thing right now is that the only instrument capable of measuring this is the human soul. And even our instrument is not, most people's instruments are not tuned finely enough to receive the information. We don't have the fMRI machine cannot measure the frequency of a thought. If we could find trauma stored in muscle tissue and measure its frequency and watch what happens in our body when it goes away. Essentially, every piece of low vibration energy that I release in a psychedelic journey increases, slowly, minutely increases my level of vibration. So when I have a big journey and I process this huge amount of trauma, my vibration increases just a little bit closer to love and enlightenment. And if we had a calculator that was so finely tuned that it could actually measure what a human's vibration is, the FDA would have no problem approving it, because we could see what's happening over the course of time. But we just don't have instrumentation yet to be able to do it.
But we've got Healing with Psychedelics. So what I really love about the book, and obviously thank you for letting me be on this journey with you and review parts of it along the way, and give some feedback on my my personal thoughts from my personal experience, is you've got this again, like you say, it's only a theory, but how it was explained within this podcast, and having read the book, or the parts of the book that are finished, it really does just that, or it really did that for me. And it was the felt sense of, yes, these medicines are scary if you don't understand what they do for you. And I mean, I really can't wait till the book's released, and to kind of get some to more people get the opportunity to read it, and really in context of, especially set against the safety wheel, because once you've got that framework for how to create a safer experience, and a more informed experience with a informed guide and informed intention and informed of the risks, and all the other elements, with the, I don't know if it's confidence is probably the best word, but the confidence that what I'm going into is with the intention of raising that vibration, clearing out some of that lower, that shit that's in the basement, really. I mean, having read the book, and having known what that's like set against my own experience, it gives me so much like gratitude for, whether this, like you say, it's a theory and unprovable, but just gratitude for the fact that you found the way to bridge, without saying this is right, this is right. There is no, we've said it, there is no right way, but there is a way to do this that honors what the medicines are, regardless of how they're used. So that's been just such a big part of this journey of getting to understand your thought process behind the why psychedelics works, and coupled with a harm reduction tool for how to use psychedelics. So yeah, it's thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to go through this, and to learn from you. It's been a real powerful for me, and it's really empowered me for how I move forward, especially with my training and my work and myself.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for being willing to actually read. It's harder than you think to find people that will take an unedited manuscript and actually read good portions of it. So I appreciate your willingness to dive in with me.
Well, we've had enough of these TED Talks just on video calls and such over the last year or so, that, yeah, I mean, of course we're going to read it. And I understand that it's it's getting a little bit later for me now. I'm in the UK, but I wanted to ensure that we've got enough time to speak about the book. So, is there anything that we haven't covered about healing with psychedelics that you wanted to highlight?
I don't think anything about the book. We covered the wheel and the theory, I think, are the two biggest pieces of that. The book is going to be out in early 2025. And it's going through the first pass of an editor right now, and there's going to be some changes and another content and proofread, and then we're going to get it out. If you're interested in finding out more about the book, there will be a launch period where anybody can buy the book for $1.99. So we want to get it in as many hands as possible. So if you want to know how and when to buy the book for $1.99, go to psychedeliciq.com. There is a section on the homepage and also a little pop-up that will allow you to put your email in, and I will send out an email once it's available. So it's only going to be available for $1.99 for probably 24 to 48 hours once we launch.
Great. And you said it's going to be launching early 2025?
Yeah, probably March or April 2025.
Fantastic.
That's the plan right now. I've changed the date at least 3 or 4 times. So that's my hope, but I have also pulled all timelines off the table at this point. That's just when it looks like it's going to be out.
Yeah, I always think that when you walk past like a new construction or shopping mall, and it's like coming, spring of 2025, and it's still the foundations are built. So yeah, as soon as you put the time on it, I feel like that's putting
I promise my book will be out sooner than Tesla's autonomous self-driving taxi.
Okay, there we go. We've got something to hold you against.
I'm pretty confident of that one.
Amazing. And so yeah, the book's obviously available for more information on Psychedelic IQ. You spoke earlier on about what the book will potentially support. You mentioned a training course in there. Could you speak a little bit more about that and maybe what's next for Psychedelic IQ?
Yeah, so Psychedelic IQ is going to be the home for all of this work, and it's really, I think there are 4 pillars that hold up the structure of Psychedelic IQ. It's safe, grounded, practical, and responsible. There is so much we do not understand about psychedelics and consciousness and mysticism and all of the mystical experiences that come in to a psychedelic experience. We can never program for any of that. But the set and setting and all of the other 10 variables, there is so much that we can do to be prepared, to better prepare ourselves. So safe, grounded, practical responsibility is the 4 guiding principles and the values that we use on Psychedelic IQ. On there, there's content that is going to be coming, more and more content. Long form content will be available, articles, helpful hints. I would encourage anybody. I produce a fair amount of content on Instagram, but Meta does not allow anybody to see that content unless they have subscribed. So they think that the content is just like, it's okay to be on the platform, but it's not safe enough to show to everybody. So they've sort of shadow banned our account. So if you do want good little snippets, it's like 3,000 characters or less. A lot of times I'm posting 3 to 4 times a week of just like relevant content. So you can sign up follow us on Instagram. And then the course will be launching January of 2025. It is a live taught course. I will literally be the one getting online once a week, and a 2-hour session will go through the Psychedelic Safety Wheel and probably a beginning and an ending course to sandwich those together. There is going to be the live talk course. I will be managing an integration circle for any members. There will be also a monthly kind of ask me anything. So for members to Psychedelic IQ and who have purchased the course, they get access to ask me anything's a private kind of show up and figure out what your next step is on the journey. I do a lot of wayfinding. I help people figure out where they went wrong, or maybe where they need to go next, what medicine to try. If they're traveling to another country, I have contacts and reputable folks in multiple countries in Central and South America. So there's also a community aspect. We'll have a Discord community for people to go on and help support each other 24/7. So between preparation of your experience, so I truly believe that if you have never done psychedelics before, if you can't spend 3 months preparing for your first experience, then you might be going too fast. If you really want safe and sustainable change, 3 months, 12 weeks of preparation. You get through the entire course in those 3 months, once a week, and everything will be recorded. So you can, if you miss a session, you can come back and watch it, have your experience, then come back and be with the community through the integration circles. And then we'll hope to have like guest presentations for people that have been on the podcast that want to come on and do some presentations. And then if you want to eventually go deeper, I take people down to Peru every November. So we're leaving a week from today, actually. We leave and we'll spend, one journey is 2 weeks in the mountains with Machu Picchu, and then a week in the jungle with ayahuasca. So if anybody is interested in going down and doing some deep work there, that's an opportunity as well. Podcast season 2 will be releasing as part of this episode. And then season 3 are going to release a lot faster this year. And then after that, there's like 5 more books that I've got in my head. So who knows when those come out, but go to psychedelicIQ.com, sign up to receive the email. I promise I don't send out a whole lot of content, so you won't get spammed.
Fantastic. And I mean, this has been such a wonderful opportunity to just speak to my friend about something that you've done. Is there anything else that you want to say before we close off for today?
A big thank you to you for your support. It's a terrifying experience to expose such deep experiences to the world, and to plant a flag in the ground and say, this is what I believe, and hope that a few other people believe you. It's been a challenging part of my journey. This book cannot be excluded from my healing journey. Being willing to show my authentic self to the world has been a lot easier. It's been a lot easier because of people like you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a journey, and I'm really excited to see where these journeys continue to take us.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks. I'll let you go to bed. Thanks for listening to the Psychedelic IQ podcast. If you resonated with this episode and are ready to go deeper into your personal work and practice, visit psychedelicIQ.com for more in-depth articles, books, training opportunities, and professionally organized psychedelic experiences hosted in both North and South America. And as always, you're perfect and you're right on time, and the path is wiser than the traveler.